said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while. For there were many coming and doing, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. That was Mark 6:31. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Thinking Well Podcast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Tom.
What's up, Tom?
What's up, Kyle? We're at camp, man.
We are. We're at...
Super exciting.
Yeah. Timberline Baptist Encampment in Lindale, Texas.
Yeah.
But we're not alone. We're joined by a couple of pastors. We have Pastor Travis Gilbert from Rodgers Baptist Church and Brother Collin Hirsch from
Holts,
Prairie
yeah.
in Pinckneyville, Illinois, respectively. Hello, gentlemen. How's it going?
Hey, guys. Good to be here.
Doing good.
Glad to have you guys on. We always look forward to coming to camp and seeing other sister churches and have a good time of fellowship and kind of reconnect after a year. I know Tom and I look forward to it every year, but we've been kind of building this up, right? We've had a few episodes where we've been talking about camp and what happens and why it's important, but we're here. We're in the middle of it, so we wanted to bring you guys on and maybe talk about what it means to you. If you guys have any stories, but I guess I'll just kind of open it up from there.
All right. Well, I'll start at the beginning of camp experience for me. My dad got saved when I was 8 years old, and that was in the fall of the year 1980. So the summer of 1981, I had just turned 9, and we were headed to camp for the first time. And that was my first experience. I had no idea what that would be. And we are at a church camp and around all these preachers and other Christians from other churches. Church was new to me, and being around other churches was really new to me. And just the whole atmosphere. I mean, the preaching and the singing, that stuff was fun. But being able to interact with all these other folks and play games, and I love playing softball, love playing basketball, and all that was really new and exciting. But being able to be pulled away for a week, and it's not like we had all kind of distractions like today's generation does, but we had all kind of distractions. We were away from a week and having focused, devotions and lessons and preaching. It really had a major impact on my life, even as a kid. And I got to see people respond to the preaching of the word in ways that I hadn't before. All of it was so new to me, and that was my first experience. But down through the years, my wife was somebody that I had gone to camp with. We didn't start dating then, but I knew her from camp, and just all kind of cool experiences and the working of the Lord through camp life.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me, camp started third or fourth grade probably. Our church didn't go to camp. My uncle was a missionary out of the Central Baptist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. And my parents would drive us 4 boys down to Little Rock on a Sunday afternoon. We'd pile in their church bus with Brother Eddie Zellner and all the youth from that church and go off to church camp. I think we went to Robbers Cave in Wilburton, Oklahoma, and Camp Daniel Springs in Gary, Texas were the 2 camps that they went to over those years. Eventually, my mom and dad started taking our youth from our church. We'd pile in an old motor home and drive off to Wilburton, Texas, to Robbers Cave. For me, it became, you get away from all the distractions, and it was a place where I knew I could meet with the Lord. He'd get my attention. And, as an 18-year-old kid, our church had stopped going to camp. And I had been in rebellion for a couple of years from the Lord, and the Lord was getting my attention. And I remember asking my mom and dad, as an 18-year-old high school senior, I said, would it be okay if I went to church camp? And I called, why can't I call his name now, from Bodine Baptist Church. Brother Joe Hocking. And I said, hey, our church isn't coming to camp. Would it be all right if I came? And he said, absolutely. And so I loaded up my car and drove the 9 or 10 hours down to camp, and that was where I got my heart right with the Lord.
Amen.
And
Can I piggyback on that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because one thing that stands out to me in camp, Collin talking about his parents taking a group from their church, is my mom and dad. My mom had just gotten right. My dad had just gotten saved in those early years, and so they were young Christians, but they threw themselves into camp. Yeah, and they would go to camp every day. They didn't just drop me off at camp or just send me. They would go, and they were counselors, and I got to see. I mean, they were always. I mean, my mom and dad were awesome, and so I was a part of their life in a very powerful way, and they were a part of mine, obviously. But I got to see them interact with campers like I'd only seen them interact with me, And so they're pouring themselves into these kids, and the kids were loving them. Just loving being around mom and dad, and I mean, still to this day. My dad died in January, 74 years old, and I can't tell you how many adults my age and a little bit younger that came through there because they knew dad and mom from camp.
Yeah.
And they were there to pay their respects.
I think it just goes to show, you never, until we get on the other side of eternity, right? You'll never know how many hearts you've touched.
Yeah.
What a true ministry will do. And I think that's true for this camp, especially. I was going to ask each of you how long, as a church, you guys have been coming. I know that, I know Rodgers has been coming forever, right? And I don't know how long Holts Prairie, but I feel like you guys have been, as long as I can remember, as long as I've been coming, you guys have been coming.
We've been coming back here now for close to 10 years, I guess. But we did camp every year, for as long as I've been involved in ministry. Since 1994 at Holts Prairie. We went through a couple of church splits at one time and lost a lot of young families, and we went a couple of years without going. We started back going to the youth conference at Rodgers, and then found our way back here. But Travis and I's our ministries really coincide with camp. We both started as youth pastors. He was working with Brother Darrell Sparks. I was working under Brother Mark Cox. And our churches worked together to get a camp going in eastern Kentucky.
Monticello, Kentucky.
And, we started out as youth pastors working together. And, I can remember him carrying his boy into the shower on his back in a cabin. A little bitty guy just crawling all over him. But we go. Our ministries really coincide and really got to know each other through camp.
That's right.
Praise
That's
God.
right.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's actually funny you say that. When we're thinking of who are we going to approach at camp to be our guests, and Tom suggested you, and I was like, well, I'm trying to find somebody that someone I can suggest, and I was like, like Travis would be perfect, and not even knowing that you guys have history and the ministries coincided. I had no idea.
Yeah,
it's definitely a God thing there, but yeah, I think. We alluded to this, and we've kind of probably talked about it at length, the last podcast about camp, but, and you said it too, but, one of the great things about camp is removing the distractions, but it's one of the one places you get to see annually that the Holy Spirit, you can see the Holy Spirit work. And, when we're playing on stage, or when, I'm listening to the message, It really feels like the Holy Spirit is moving amongst the people. You could feel it, you could see it, and you don't see that a lot anymore. You don't see people really being broken by the Holy Spirit and Christ working in their life physically. I think it's one of the things I enjoy most about this week.
Sure. And how long has Rodgers been coming?
Rodgers has been coming. I don't know the entire history, but Rodgers used to go to Daniel Springs. And then when that camp and all the churches that went to that camp moved to Timberline, and I don't know what year that was, Rodgers was a part of that, and we've been here ever since. I joined the staff at Rodgers in 2009, and we've been coming here since before then as well. So,
okay.
With no interruption.
Yeah.
Well, Holts Prairie was my first experience at this camp because we used to live up in Southern Illinois, and Colin's like, well, we go to youth camp down in Texas,
Right,
and I'm like,
yeah.
wait, what? Like, well, I
Well,
mean, not that I hate going down to Texas, because we moved up to Southern Illinois from Texas, and I was
Texas,
like,
yeah.
okay, cool, we can go back. That sounds like a plan, at least once a year.
One of the things that I love about this camp, there are several things, but one is it's a family camp.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was my first experience with a family camp.
Where
yeah.
a husband and wife can take their vacation if they want. They can go to camp with their family, be here with their family the entire week. We have camps that are available to us in Southern Illinois. They're almost all Southern Baptist camps, which is fine, but they're all, 4th through 7th graders this week.
Right.
8th, 9th, or 8th through 12th next week, and you drop your kids off, and you leave them with who knows, as their counselors, and I like the idea of being able to come to camp, being able to be in the cabin with all the boys from our camp, or from our church, and being able to interact with them, and spend a week discipling them.
Sure. It's great. One of my mentors, Brother Sparks, was one of my mentors, and he always would go to camp. And he was a camp director. We had a camp before I came out to Texas. That church, and before we started going to Kentucky for a camp, that church had their own camp, and he was the camp director. And so he was always neck deep in camp. And then Brother Thomas, my other mentor, I mean, he never missed camp. He would always be at camp. He'd always be in the cabin. He'd always be interacting with the kids. And it's one of the unique opportunities. Collin and I were talking about this earlier in the week. It's one of the most unique and only opportunities that a church is going to have to interact with their pastor on that kind of level. We're laid back. We're sleeping in the same room. We're eating in the same room. We're
Very
goofing
intimate,
off.
yeah.
I mean, it's good for the folks in the church to be able to have that side of the pastor too on a big scale.
Well, and I was going to say, with it being a family camp too, one thing that I've noticed, there's like these different levels of family, right? Because you've got the families that are in the church. That's the one level of family that's here, right? And then you've got the church family that is coming around all those families together. But then on top of that, I think what I see just more and more as I keep coming back to this camp is like the people, all of the churches that come to camp, because it's a family camp, have kind of become a family as well. And I hear people tell stories about like camp and how long they've known each other, and it's because of this camp. And it's just I would have never even gotten acquainted with the Lake Worth folks, which is where I'm a member at now, if we wouldn't have come to this camp. And then once the Lord moved us back down to Texas, like, you know what, we know Lake Worth from camp. Why don't we go over there and take it and see what's going on over there? And the Lord just kind of moved in that way. But it's really cool to see, because of that family atmosphere, how the family level just goes up to where it becomes like the whole camp is a family.
Yeah, we need that church-to-church kind of interaction and fellowship, and camp is another, if not one of the best vehicles to provide that, where you get to interact with each other church to church.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you create a network. I think Collin, I think you said that before we started. Yeah, really cultivates that relationship, and like I said, we look forward to seeing you guys and our other sister churches and fellowshipping, and just kind of renewing that relationship every year. And honestly, we should probably have more events like this, right?
It's amazing. It's
should just be one.
Amazing how close you can grow to people who live 700 miles away.
Yeah.
That you only spend 4 days with.
Right.
Yeah.
Less than that, really.
Yeah.
I was just sharing with my assistant pastor and his wife this afternoon and this morning. One of the things that camp has done for me is it has developed a nationwide network of Christian friends.
Right.
Several years ago, my son, we got a phone call that he'd fallen 40 feet off of a cliff, broken his leg and his arm, and we really didn't know what to expect, if he was even going to live. And so I made a quick Facebook post, to pray for Tyler. We're headed to Springfield, Missouri. They were flying him there from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And man, in the next several weeks, the phone calls, the messages that we got, people had prayed for him.
Yeah.
And almost all of those can be traced back to our relationships from church camp.
Yeah.
It just, kind of joked about on the way there, I drove about 120 miles an hour across Missouri, and we drove past several state troopers who were sitting on the side of the road. And, the last one that we saw, and I saw him way up ahead, and my wife kept saying, "You're going to get pulled over. You're going to get pulled over." I said, "I don't care. Maybe they'll give us an escort to the hospital." Right. And we drove past that last one. Never flashed his lights. I'm doing 110 miles an hour, and she's just shaking her head. She's like, "I can't believe they didn't pull you over." And I said, "Becky, half the country's praying for us.
Right.
They might not even see us."
That's a good point.
But it was it just the relationships that you build. It's just incredible.
They're a lifetime long.
Yeah.
Right. They're under the umbrella of Christendom. Right. They're brothers and sisters that you forge relationships with every year. Hopefully more than that. Multiple events a year, like I just said. But that's a great story. Right? You have a network all across the country, people willing to drop everything and intercede on your behalf and pray for you. It's great.
Yeah. Do you think it's not just about us, right? I like to get into like some of our campers out there too. Do you think that those type of relationships are still being forged? I can go back and not having gone to camp as a youth, but to look at some of the relationships that my kids made and friendships that they made at camp and stuff like that. And they just seem like they didn't quite last, or they weren't quite as deep as I hear, like you guys talk about and stuff like that. Do you think that the kids that are here right now, do you think they're benefiting from the same thing? Or
well, nothing's uniform, right? I mean, we can't, we never can cover everything with the same blanket. But I know this: I've got 3 adult sons. They're one just turned 28 yesterday, and I got a 25-year-old and a 22 who's about to be 23. Only one of those 3 boys are married right now, and he married a girl he met at this camp.
Okay.
So yeah, I do think connections are being made, and that's. I mean, he met her here. Her church didn't even come to the camp, but her uncle's church did.
Okay.
And she came with him. It's Thomas McGarrity's niece. My daughter-in-law's named Madison Gilbert now, but Madison McGarrity, and she came to camp, and my son met her the first year, and they didn't start dating that year, but that's where that connection was made.
That's
cool. And I know there's similar connections as well as friendships, and a good friendship, Tom, I think is not necessarily one where you see the same guy every day all the time, but Collin's a close friend of mine, and we don't see each other all the time, but when we see each other, we pick right back up where we left off. And those are great friendships. Yeah. And events like this, and I'll plug our conference because that's one of those deals I think that is similar, not the same as, but similar to, that is necessary and helpful. And it kind of has a like function within the life of our churches.
Yeah, and I'd say for myself too, when we were up at Holts, Prairie, this is one of the places that Collin and Rich and I deepened our friendship and kind of forged friendship where we got to know each other a little bit better because we spent time with each other. And every time we see them now, and we see them periodically throughout the year actually too. Yeah. It's great just to kind of pick back up. And I think Rich said it the last time we saw him. He's like, it's just like you never left every time we see you. I'm like, well, that's awesome, man. That's how it's supposed to be. I agree. I think that's great.
Those are some of the best friendships. And that's how you know it's a real friendship. Yeah. Right. Unconditional friendship. But Travis, I'd love to, at least address the mission conference as well. I think it's a great tie in here. But I agree. We usually, we come here and do camp, and then just a few weeks after that, right, we're up in Garland. Just one of those things, right? We've just cultivated a schedule of, hey, we're committed to doing this, and you guys more so. Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to, stand up when the world tells us we're not supposed to act a certain way. But it's great. Yeah, no, this is the week where stuff gets real, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, how has kind of your devotion times been going, last couple nights?
Been pretty good. We've got a kind of a quiet group this year, most of them. You always have one or two kids that want to dominate the conversation, it seems like. But, when I was a kid, it was not uncommon to see the altars flooded during the invitation at camp. I don't seem like you see that as much anymore. Most of the kids that come to know the Lord, it seems like they do that during devotions or, after devotions in the cabin. It's, where they're talking to their pastor or their counselor. And
a lot less public.
Yeah, a lot less public. But it's good. You get the kids to interact, and we had some shared their testimony last night. We talked about testimony in the message, and some that volunteered to share their testimony, what God had done in their life, and it's been good.
Cool. I think that's an interesting comment about the invitation. I think part of that is when I first started going to camp, and in those early years, I would have a similar experience too when it came to the invitation. But I was new to church world, even though I was a kid. But most of the people that were in the camp were very familiar with church world, and so they understood the lingo, they understood the pattern that our kind of churches had, where you had an altar call, and all what was expected. And I think a lot of the kids that come to our camp, they're not as familiar with that maybe as has been in the past. So the idea of coming forward at the end of the service just is kind of foreign, or if not foreign, unnatural, like, what's the deal? What is the deal with it? And I'm not saying that's either good or bad. I'm just saying I think that's what it is. But personally, I really like the opportunity to have the personal interaction with them when it comes to decision making. Because when I am in here or at the junior camp and a kid comes forward, my first reaction is to take them away from all the activity so that we can have a personal conversation, as opposed to the pressure of up front. But I've been leading in devotions the young adults. So like the youngest guy in my devotion group is 15, and the oldest is probably a couple of the adult men are in my devotion group as well. And we've been having some really open and frank conversations about followership, and the fact that we're going to follow someone or something, and who that needs to be. And so, they've been good conversations and very profitable.
Yeah, it's great. We have kind of a similar story, in the Lake Worth dorm. It's interesting because there's definitely more adults than there are campers at this point. But we always make it a point to, ask the younger kids that were up on the hillside, what they learned, and get them familiar with, being able to publicly say it and just make sure they're listening. But I'm always surprised. There's always, a few of them that are able to, kind of repeat what they learned pretty effectively and give the application, which is great to see. And then we kind of turn over to, the youth, right, and say, hey, what do you think about, the little maid, right, and what happened with Naaman and everything, and get some good conversations going. It's our evangelist this year, brother Dave McCracken is phenomenal at taking a text and really explaining it in a way where it'll stay with you.
Yeah.
And getting to the application and making it last. So no, it's been great. And similar conversations. One of the things he said last night was, he gave a story about someone who used to go to his church, and her husband had a fall, and long story short, he ended up passing away, but he was able to be there with him and try to resuscitate him. And after that, he had to travel to do another camp, or I think it was a vacation Bible school. Yeah. Well, in the busyness of going to the hospital and being with that church member through her loss and having to kind of pick up the pieces and go elsewhere, he didn't realize that he still had the guy's blood on his hands.
Oh, wow.
And the analogy was for the people in our lives that we know aren't saved, but we are too timid or scared, frightened, not bold enough to step up and share the gospel with them and be a light to them in this dark world. Their blood is on our hands.
Yeah.
And that was, really a big topic of discussion last night. Like, hey, like, search yourself. There's people in your life. Like, scriptures are pretty clear. Their blood is on your hands.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it's heavy.
Yeah. Well, even at camp too, I think it kind of hit home for some of our youth that, hey, you are at camp, but not everybody here knows what you know.
That's right.
Like, and if you're off doing something that maybe you shouldn't be doing and they're with you, like, instead of, you could be spending that time pointing them in the right direction. Yeah. And here instead, like, you, who does know better, you're not leading them in the direction they should go. Like, is that going to be blood on your hands? And we kind of asked them that question last night. That's like, good. Well, are you doing what you need to be doing? And I mean, and then like all of us adults are thinking to ourselves, well, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing?
Like, not just the youth. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a question for us too.
That's right.
And when you think about it, like, there's so much more we could be doing, and even as adults, and we're just so many missed opportunities. I think that really don't get pulled out of this box that we keep everything in until we get in a setting like this amongst all these other Christians, right? And everybody's looking around like, oh man, like, we're all failing at this and we can all do better at this. And the problem, I think, sometimes is we're relying on our own strength and our own courage to make sure that we can go ahead and articulate it correctly. And it's kind of cool. One of the newer Christians at our church was talking in our dorm the other day about how to witness to people, and I had just kind of been share your testimony with him, and then Brother Dave kind of said it yesterday too, and how effective just our testimony is. And I would challenge our listeners, like, if you know Christ, one of the easiest ways that you can witness is like, I once was blind.
That's right.
Now I see. And that can have such an impact on somebody's life, because they're like, wait a second, maybe I'm blind. Maybe I need to see too. And it's so simple. Yeah. And we neglect the simplicity of it so much. And being in a setting like this, I think, really calls out, because you're looking around at all these people that are struggling just like you, and they're not perfect just like you. And then you take that back to your church, and you realize as you're looking around the church, like, wow, they're all struggling just like me, and they're all imperfect just like me. But I think it's so important to have a setting like this where kind of every year you're getting that refresher course and how much better we can do. And you take that back to your church and you try to plug that in everywhere. Absolutely.
A week where you're focused on Christ and the things of Christ as opposed to other good and normal things is good for all of us, not just the kids. And that's what's good for, I think, for adults is the week of focus on Christian fellowship, Christian teaching, and application of that. And some self-reflection in ways that we don't always afford ourselves throughout the year.
You mentioned coming away and getting away from the influence. When we were kids, you didn't have a cell phone,
right.
And so many things that. Distractions that the kids have now, but still just leaving, the television, the radio, and all that stuff behind back then. Sure. Now our kids almost need a couple of days of decompression,
right?
Before
detox,
before they can really start to focus, because they're like in shock that they don't have their phone in their hand or whatever. And per Tom's question earlier about are the connection still being made amongst the young people. I think maybe part of the reason if it's not being made is our kids don't know how to interact with people.
Yeah.
They can't get somebody's number and shoot them a text or send them a Snapchat or something. They
have
don't
to
know.
Talk to them face to face.
Yeah, even I got to talk to that person to get to know them.
Personal interaction is at a low and digital interaction is at a high.
And so, I think some of our kids are probably not making connections that they could just because they don't know how to interact with people.
Right.
The digital age ruins the intimacy of a true relationship. Sometimes you look and we've got all these kids who their idea of social interaction are like, well, I can Snapchat them, or let me see them and see what so-and-so is doing. Like, so-and-so is standing over there. Go ask them what they're doing. Yeah.
Well, I think
you don't need an update on their page to go figure out what's going on in their lives.
Some of our kids interact with the kids from other churches more after they leave and get their phones again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Than they do when they're standing here next to them.
Right.
They get their number and then afterwards, because I got kids in my church that, they know what, so and so he's doing this now or he's doing that now because they're communicating afterwards, but you don't see it too much. You don't see it. Don't seem like you see it as much. The kids intermingling, from one church to another.
They're more intimidated with personal interaction than they are with social media interaction.
Yeah.
It's easier to hide behind it, right? It's less challenging.
And it's more their comfort zone, That's the thing. We always talk about comfort zones, and those things are always changing depending on who you are and when you are, And they're much more comfortable with interacting through a device than through a personal interaction. I mean, and I'm painting with a broad brush when I say that, but that's typical, I think. I'm curious. Do you guys do devotions as a church group? Is it one big devotion for the whole group, or do you guys break it down into? Because I'm just curious as to how y'all do it.
Yeah, so it kind of both. We kind of all hurdle around in a big circle as much as we can with the bunks and stuff in there, but where everybody can kind of see each other and hear. So in that regard, it's all collective.
Yeah.
But we do separate it, and we want to hear from like I said earlier, the younger folk first, and it's a good opportunity for us to, who weren't up on the Hillside Chapel to, hear what they learned, right? Different kind of set of messages. And, it's encouraging to see, young men listen and take notes. They're fumbling through their notes and they're trying to say stuff. And some of it, just some of the notes they take are better than mine.
Yeah, pretty insightful.
Yeah. And then after that, we're still in the circle, and then we kind of, elevate it a little bit, and we say, hey, campers, like I said, there's a lot of adults, but campers, specifically youth group members, what'd you think? Do you have anything written down? What'd you think about, Brother McCracken's message tonight?
Right.
And then we, depending on who answers and what kind of discussion we have, we'll go from there. Or it's, hey, adults, do we have anything that you wrote down or anything that you'd like to add? So it's really, we don't really break into smaller groups or something like that, but
it's church-wide, but you're letting every demographic in the group kind of have a representation.
Right.
We've kind of done the same thing in our men's cabin. We've always combined with whatever church. We've always shared. We don't bring enough to fill up one side, so we share with another church, and we just all get together and we do the same thing. We ask the younger kids. Now, our ladies have never done that. They've always just done devotions with our group, but it's always been our entire church group, regardless.
Well, it's cool sometimes doing it that way because the younger kids will say something that they had up on the Hill Chapel, right? And then the teens will kind of play off of that. So they're kind of already acting in that kind of mentor role sometimes, and to see that interaction. And what we, like Kyle said, we'll usually move from the teens to the younger adults that are, the college and career age. And then the teens up here will say that the Holy Spirit spoke to them about a certain thing in the message, and the young adults will kind of play off of that and add to it, and it kind of trickles up. Yeah. But at the same time trickles back down too, to where everything's getting tied together, and it's cool to sit around as like the older adults in the room and just listen to all those demographics interact with each other and kind of bring each other along to a different level of understanding and even what they had heard, and for even the young adults, one of them will have heard and focused on one thing in the message, and the other one will have heard and focused on the other things. And you see kind of these little light bulbs going off with people, and it's like, and even me sometimes I'm like, wow, I didn't even pick up on that. Like, that's really good.
Yeah.
That, or it prompts questions, right? Something that even, a younger guy will prompt a question maybe from one of our new members or or even maybe an adult that hey, what'd you mean by that? Or okay, cool, like what did that mean? It's a great time to from the oldest to the youngest, just to converse as a church family and really just get real with God. And we like to pull out all the stops, just get as real as possible, because one of our I think you were talking about Sam earlier.
Yeah.
He's one of our new members, and I'll tell you what, guys, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but you have like a new member come to church with his family, and they're just on fire, pull out all the stops, pedal to the metal, just want to get right and want to just be on fire, and it just no signs of slowing down. I told him yesterday, I was like, dude, like it's so like refreshing, so powerful to see that. 'Cause I told him, I was like, the tenacity that you have, because he's always he's a RV salesman, so he's very very upbeat kind of guy, kind of have to be, but it's just who he is. He definitely has the spiritual gift of evangelism, which is the kind of guy he is. And I told him, I was like, dude, there's people in our church, and I told him, I was like, people in this room don't have the tenacity and the courage that you do. And you're a newer Christian. And I was like, it is so powerful and uplifting to see you. And it's a lot of questions, and we're able to be there for him and just get some thoughts stirring about what's being preached up here. And it's just a great time for everybody to grow and see, from the newest Christian, the youngest Christian that we have, to the oldest saint that we have, just to see every walk of life. And like Tom said, right, pull different things out of the message and talk about them. I think that's humans. That's kind of what tends to happen. We interpret things differently, and we have different thoughts on the application.
Well, and the cool thing about Sam too is like he's got his whole family here, but this is their first time ever at church camp since him and his wife got saved, and it's just so cool to like see them interacting with people, and then they're like, "This is like being at church all the time," and we're like, "Yeah, it's
like, that's what's so great about it."
That's cool.
They're great. We'll definitely make sure next time I see you guys, I'll introduce you to them.
Yeah, I'd love to meet him.
But they, it's so great to see him.
Sam, sorry for talking about you, man. We just love you. Sam challenges me all the time.
Real.
Like, man.
We'll have him on sometime soon for sure. He'd be one of those guys. Talking
He'd
about
be the
testimonies.
little maid. He'd be the little maid for sure.
Yep. Well, as we kind of wrap up a little bit here, I guess something I wanted to kind of ask you guys is, the future of, maybe this camp specifically, Timberline, but just maybe church camp in general. I mean, where do you guys see it going? I know we kind of talked about, campers, or just a generation that's coming up that isn't quite as, traditionally social. They're social media heavy, but they're not really, talking to each other, way more introverted. With that in mind, I mean, where do you guys see ministries like this here at Timberline going in the future?
Well, trending, first of all, looking back across my life, the trend at camp has been going from more of a high school base of students to middle school. You don't have nearly the high school and college numbers that we did back then. It's more of a middle school thing, and I don't know why that is, but and I don't know if we need to, in some ways, change our approach because of that. But man, I hope to see it continue on. It's something that we'll do perpetually till the Lord comes back. It's there's just nothing like getting away from everything else and focusing on what the Lord has to say to you for a week. And I don't think He'll mind me saying this, but 4 weeks from this Saturday, my daughter's going to marry a young man that we brought to camp a few years ago after they started dating, and he said to me one night, I'd never heard this terminology until I started coming to church with you. But he said, you're talking about people getting saved. And he said, I've been here at this camp this week, and everybody's talking about when they got saved or how their lives changed since they got saved. And he said, what does that even mean? And, were it not for his interaction with all the people here at camp to stir that question in his mind, I really believe that was, really where the seed really started,
That's awesome.
heavy water.
That's awesome.
But it's, I hope those kinds of things continue to happen, that we bring kids that are unchurched and or they've come from a different background, maybe a different church, but have never really heard the saving message of the gospel.
Yeah.
And, I pray that kids that are saved come to camp, and, if nothing else, that they're able to. I came from a smaller church in a small community, and one of the things for me at camp was I started looking around and seeing all these of my peers who were trying to live for the Lord, when I thought in a lot of ways I was the only one.
That's good.
It was an encouragement to me to think, there are people there that
You're not alone.
There are girls out there that would be a prospective wife to me that's trying to live for the
and what a better place to meet
and
godly woman here.
I think especially for kids from smaller churches, it's a huge encouragement to them to get somewhere like this and see how many young people there are that are trying to live for the Lord. But,
I mean, I think I don't think the need for camp and camp ministry is ever going to wane, until the Lord returns. I mean, I think it's a powerful week of ministry. I think it's an expensive week of ministry, but one of the best uses of church funds that you're going to find, especially when you're involved in a good camp. And this is not just a week of entertainment. This is not just a week of goofing off. This is not just a social camp with a little Jesus sprinkled in. I think our camp, as a family camp, both tracks, the junior track and the senior track, is well done from top to bottom. And Craig and Andrea and their church deserve a lot of credit for the guiding of this camp in that direction. But I've been in the junior chapel and I've been in here, and I mean, there is fantastic teaching on the level that everybody in those respective chapels can get a hold of it. And I mean, I was feverishly taking notes in the junior chapel, and he's preaching to kids, I mean, it was awesome stuff. Luke was doing a great job, and his dad before him did a fantastic job in there. So I don't think the need is ever going to, the trends, I do think it's interesting you say that, Collin, because Brother Josh Pettyjohn, my music and youth guy, he's teaching the 12 and 13-year-old class. There's 51 kids in that class. It's by far the largest class in the camp this week, and that's the 12 and the 13-year-olds. And some of that may be going because schools are so busy now. Yeah. I mean, I played sports in high school, but it's nothing like it is today. It's almost like a professional franchise now. And so some of the older kids, I think, are already thinking about those things. Whereas some of and I don't know, I don't have any evidence, I don't have any scientific evidence of that. That's just, I'm spitballing. But and another trend is, we live in a very messed up world, and so kids are coming from very difficult backgrounds, even more so than when I was going to campus. And so that adds a layer of difficulty to the kids you're bringing to camp and how you shepherd them. But I think we have to learn how to negotiate those things without ditching the camp model, because this is powerful.
We've got a high school girl. She's going into her senior year. She's a cheerleader. That's the only thing she does. Yeah. And she said, I can't wait till next year. I want to go to camp.
Can't wait till she graduates so she'll have time to go to camp.
Graduate high school. She'll be cheerleading sponsor wouldn't let her off the activities they had scheduled for the week.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what you said about Steve was probably how we should look at camp, right? If during camp or after camp, because of the influence of being at camp, even one kid
I was literally just about to say this. Yeah.
keeps getting saved,
worth it.
That's what we're going to do camp for.
Absolutely.
There's not a price too high.
Yeah.
There's not an expense too high. Travel too far. If one person, one life is changed forever for eternity's sake, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I've said this in the past, and we'll wrap it up here. But if you're listening to this and your church, doesn't really offer anything like this, if you're, kind of confused on what we're talking about, and you guys not really familiar with camp, we urge you to, maybe bring it up with your pastor and ask about it. We would love to grow this camp if you guys are around the area. I know last time I said, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas area, but Collin's sitting across from me right here, travels about 700 miles. So maybe I can extend that a little bit. If you're anywhere close in, the Western Hemisphere, come to Timberline Baptist Camp in Lindale. No, I think it's worth a discussion. It truly is a great time to just get away from everything and get your priorities realigned and get real with God. And it's a great place to do it. I'll throw it to Tom.
Just like last time when we kind of did the camp intro, I would encourage you to give us your camp stories. You can email us at podcast@lakeworthbaptist.org. You can get a hold of us on social media, Instagram or Facebook. It's LWBC_publications. We'd love to hear from you. We actually got a camp story from my brother that we'll have to find an opportunity to share at some point once we get some more feedback and stuff. But get a hold of us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, as Collin said, like everybody keeps talking about this saved and being saved and life change. Like if you got a question about that, you can get a hold of us on the same things. We'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, we would love to interact with you and be a help to you in any way possible and offer any answers to any questions. That's why we're here. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Loved it.
And thank you, listeners, for taking another plunge into the thinking well. We will see you next week. Bye, everybody.